As a senior vice president for ESPN, Traug Keller was one of the most important executives in Bristol for more than 2 decades. He led ESPN Audio and was the head of the talent office and was in charge of ESPN Deportes. Before that, he was the president of ABC Radio Networks. I wanted to have Traug on to find out what has changed in the business and how he saw it since he's left ESPN 6 years ago. We like to start fast on the main event, so I want to ask you just first off, in your 2 decades more at ESPN after you left ABC Networks, what was the biggest difference from when you started, early 2000s, to when you left in 2020?
Oh my gosh. Maybe the most obvious is that the type of choices people had in life for media was countable. It was plentiful, but it was countable. Now it is boundless. That's probably the single biggest change, right? So if you looked at the radio business, for example, right, there's 10,000 commercial radio stations in the country with 10,000 program directors. I mean, now you could argue there's 350 million program directors in the country, right? Everybody is their own program director, who they want to listen to in terms of talk, all of that. You've seen the power shift from really the supplier to the individual, right? Can make a choice. Journalists like yourself now have direct relationships with people. Look at this. You've got a podcast, right?
Exactly.
Who would have thought? You're not going through the Murdochs or the Times. You're Andrew Marchand going directly to your constituency.
Don't forget, I do have my full-time job with the Athletic, so still have the big.
I said the Times. I call that the Times.
And you started at the Times too. When I did my research, I found that out. Also, you worked with Paul Harvey, had a big part in Sean Hannity's development. So we want to get into all that. How does that change in terms of when you look at the audio business? You know, ESPN Radio is still going. We have Chris Olivero, who is the president of Odyssey, which oversees WFAN among many sports radio stations. How has it changed in terms of how you have to approach it as an executive?
I think it has put a premium on content. You could always argue that's always been content is always king, right? The trite phrase that has put it even more into focus. And funny you mentioned Chris. I think he has done and his group have done an unbelievable job with 1010 Wins in New York. 1010 Wins, right, in a very fractionalized, you can argue that radio is maybe the most fractionalized besides print, right? There's just 8 billion ways to listen. They had their best ratings in 30 years. And that's because they took WCBS AM, very difficult decision, down. They combined the best of WCBS AM with 1010 Wins, and the product is outstanding. They were able to gain audience in a business that, quite frankly, has lost a great deal, right, to all the plethora of choices that people have. To answer your original question, there is more of a premium on superstar talent than ever before. So you see why Joe Rogan is getting $1 zillion. Those are the Paul Harveys of today, right? I remember doing Paul Harvey's last contract, and it was a bigger contract than Rush had or Imus or even Howard Stern at the time. People like Stephen A. Smith and Joe Rogan are getting these deals because of this boundless opportunity for people to have all the choices they have. And by the way, I would argue the sports leagues have benefited from this, right? Because they have content that cuts through. And so if you're a media company, you are in search for what cuts through and what can provide some sort of mass audience that then equates into monetization, whether through subscription or advertising or both.
Yeah, I want to get a little deeper into what executives should be doing. To listen to the rest of the podcast, andrewmarchand.com, andrewmarchand.com to be a full